interrupt you for discussing the truth. We have I've got Dave Wallace with me, District 2 U.S. congressional candidate, U.S. Congress, District 2 candidate out of Maryland.
Yes, sir.
Dave, when you approached me, a few moments ago, and Mike Lindell was at the booth next to us talking about voter fraud.
Right.
And we probably all know that Mike's been fighting voter fraud for 3 years now. Most Americans that are up to date with what's happening in the country politically understand that we have a problem with our voting system. And Dave, there's a book I came across a few years ago called Vote Scam, The Stealing of America.
Right.
And it was written by, you familiar with this book?
Go ahead, keep going.
It was written by two brothers out of Miami. You know that I
Oh, yeah, I've heard about them. Go ahead.
Dave Collier. Or not Dave Collier, the Collier brothers.
Right.
Their names are. But literally, Dave, they have traced the voting system scam back to IBM and a collusion with mainstream media. And what these brothers have said, and the book was published over 15 years ago, what they have said, Dave, is that the presidential election has been rigged back to JFK. And if that research is true, that means we've been fighting ridiculous wars now since John was assassinated for someone else. Okay, now.
So in 2003, Chavez himself lost his election. He shut down the election, and people will recognize this model in the middle of the night when he realized the votes were completely against him for 3 hours. Does that sound familiar? Middle of the night, 3 hours, and they flipped the votes. But they had to do it manually. And what he said was, I never want to be humiliated again where we have to go and shut down the voting to create suspicion of the validity of this election. And we need to fix it. They called in some people that were programmers, and they created a model where they could tabulate ballots by machine. Well, the machines were able to be manipulated by a company in Venezuela, and in turn they were able to produce a system that could flip votes. Then what happened was, as I understand it, they were able to then create an opportunity where they never had to shut down the election again or again and again. They didn't have to do the 3 hours because as the votes were being tabulated, they'd flip them in a concurrent way on a constant moving stream so they could keep the vote tally where they wanted it. And it was all systematized. And then what happened was, at some point in time, some people in the United States said, that's a pretty damn good trick. And they purchased the software.
Starts with a D.
No companies were purchased one to the other, but the software can be sold as almost like an open platform. And if that's how some people can recognize it, that's good. But in actuality, we've all been sucker punched for quite a while. And then what happened was in 2018, California started looking at ballots and saying, how can we get mail-in ballots to help us? A friend of mine, Dana Rohrabacher, won, and he won by about 2.5%, 3%. And he was a sage, good Reagan Republican. He was actually working in the Reagan White House when he was a young man. He's now been in the service of our Congress for quite a few years. But in 2018, they launched a pilot program in California on mail-in ballots. So these mail-in ballots now are ones where they get low-propensity voters. Now, some low-propensity voters died 2 election cycles before, but the ballot registration rolls, they haven't been cleaned. So they're still there. And somebody will nefariously go and vote on their behalf. somebody who's moved, they'll vote on their behalf. And the checks and balances aren't there to determine, even if they've moved in somewhere else in California, if they've got the same name, you could have two people with the same name. So it's very hard to recognize. I have a friend of mine in Baltimore. They called it the Democrat machine during D'Alessandro. Both the father and the son who became mayors of Baltimore. The lady who happened to be their the daughter to the father was a lady by the name of Nancy D'Alessandro. She then moved to California, and I think we know the story about some lady by the name of Nancy Pelosi. Her middle name is D'Alessandro. So one of the things my friend who lived 2 doors down from her told me, and I will not mention whether it was to the left or the right because they might remember who he was just a kid, 18 years old, able to vote for the first time. Well, see, he got a bonus. He didn't just vote first. He voted second, third, fourth. He voted about 12 times that day. He had crib sheets, and the party bosses knew who was there. They had the voter registration rolls. They knew who wasn't available to vote because they were either moved or dead. So they gave him 12 crib sheets, each one in a different precinct. Even when he couldn't, and this cracks him up, and he hates what he did because he didn't realize what he was doing. It was just kind of, Dad said, you got to do it, you got to do it. So he was sent off on a mission. So he would go in, he couldn't even pronounce some of these names, Polish names, Ukrainian names, and they would help him pronounce the name for himself as long as he was able to sign, as long as he was able to say what the address was and tell them the name roughly. They would, and even if they knew, these Democrat bosses who took both the Democrat role as well as the Republican role, because there were so many Democrats there, they had full control. So the Republican person who was supposed to be the monitor, who was part of the captains, they were also Democrats. So that's what the machine was in Baltimore itself. And that's why the Democrat Party has become so strong, at least in Baltimore, if not other places. And these are personal stories told to me from my friends who live in the Baltimore area. And they've changed from Democrat to Republican because they realized the Democrat Party had failed them. At one point in time, when it was John F. Kennedy and others, where they really wanted to fight and work hard for the people, it was one thing. But then he realized that they had been taken on the socialist values, like Welch had talked about, where we won't need to run, we the communists, we the socialists, won't need to even run a candidate anymore because the Democrats have taken on the full values of that we aspire to, which are pure communist models. That's what happened. So we have to realize that today's Democrat leadership is not the Democrat rank and file, and we can't fight with people in the rank and file who have the same problems as us, the same dreams and hopes and aspirations that are being dashed because of the open border and the crime that comes with it. The economy where we have inflation and parents can't figure out how to make ends meet just to buy groceries and pay for gas that's $3.50 in most areas of Maryland, $3.25. And then they have a problem when they send their children to school. And the gentleman I was speaking to just the other day said, Dave, I work hard every day. I do everything I can for my kids, but then I have to monitor the kind of homework assignments they have because they're trying to indoctrinate my children to this idea that they don't have an identity. They don't have a genetic identity given by God. And I've got to keep calling them up and saying, why are you trying to harm my child? You're trying to make my little boy a girl. You're trying to make my little boy a girl and my girl a boy. And they are now being confused. And they're being told that the doctor could have made a mistake. And yet they're genetically boys, genetically girls. And this is what I'm saying now. It is time we take back America. But we can't allow the elite and the Ivy League elite, who have no semblance of understanding what Americans are going through every day, who aren't in that ultra elite class or elite class. We have to stop allowing them to divide us, because when they divide us, they conquer us. And a house divided shall not stand. We have to draw people together under the model, not of Democrats, not of Republicans, but as Americans. And whether or not you're a veteran or not, or I'm a veteran, when I was doing wreaths across America, Ian, and I really appreciate you having me on for me to tell this story, we were all Americans when we were handing out those wreaths, and there were Democrats from Baltimore City, Republicans from around the area were handing out the wreaths. But if I had asked them to go out and put only on the D's and only on the R's, and these veterans at the Baltimore National Veterans Cemetery, they died and they gave their ultimate sacrifice, and they fought with courage and valor. Not one of them died because they were a Republican or a Democrat. They died because they loved the values of America, and they wanted to see their children survive in a land where they were free. And in this country, that's the citizen birthright of every single American, and that's what we are fighting for. And that's why I'm running for U.S. Congress in the 2nd District. But I will tell you, not one of those markers on those graves had a D or an R behind their name. When they died Americans. And if we start getting back to these principles where we can love our country again, and we love the flag because it represents those values. We love our fellow Americans because we're made in the image and likeness of God, and God loves all of his children. And we have to start seeing our neighbors as human beings, not a D or an R. And we can't keep fighting like this, because if we keep fighting like this, it's going to tear us apart. And none of our children will have the opportunity to aspire, to hope, to dream, and to accomplish their dreams. And that's why I'm running for office. But what we've got to do is we got to bring back the heart into America. Government doesn't have love and affection. Only parents do. And mothers and fathers in a home actually make a home where there is love for the children. We've got to put the heart back into the home by getting government out of our lives, out of our way, so we can struggle to do the best we can. Because when government gets in the way, they only make it harder for us.
So what we labeled that, I believe, Dave, was something called a constitutional conservative.
Absolutely.
That's what I labeled it.
That's how I label it. And I also label it Restore America's Mission. We're not elephants, we're not donkeys, we're rams. We're all in belief of this American model that's been granted by God. God has given us this blessed place.
Dave, if I heard this correctly, the Venezuela voting machine that Chavez used in his favor, are you saying that the name Pelosi, which I believe belongs to the man she married, De Lorenzo is what I thought I heard you say. Are you saying that
De Alessandro.
De Alessandro. Okay.
So it's
very different.
It's the De Alessandro family. De Alessandro family. No, they didn't do it. They just had their own model even before that. So we have multiple reasons why we lose elections when they're close. So we have first of all, mail-in ballots where they harvest ballots of people that might not have otherwise been able to vote, and they're voted for on their behalf, and there's no way to detect it. They've gone and allowed this to happen by people like Linda Lamone, who did not clean the voter registration rolls for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and they've been lax. If you look in Maryland, Montgomery County specifically, and I want to preface this by most registrations based on census equate to about 65% of the voting eligible class. 65, maybe 68. Now, we know 100% is maximum, right? So what happens is in Montgomery County, based on the census for Montgomery County, Maryland, there are 104.6, I believe it's 104.6% of the census eligible voters registered to vote. Now, when I get to 100 people in a room, and somehow or other I count 105, somebody has to be counted twice, or somebody's got to be squeezed in there beyond the number of eligible voters based on census. And yet that's what's happening. These are the kind of things happening. And when you look at these ballots, where we see that they're able to go in, and this was in a court in Georgia, where they testified under oath and within the court in front of a judge, and they were able to show how these voting machines are able to flip ballots and change the outcomes of the vote by 10, 20 people, 50 people, 1,000 people, 10,000 people. These are the things that are going to harm Americans' belief in our election process, our democratic process. And if anybody believes in our American system, we know that we have to have fair elections. And today, over 70% of Americans know in their hearts, they believe that our American election system is broken, and we need to get back to ballots where somebody fills out a ballot and it's hand counted. When somebody comes in, they just can't try to read a name off a crib sheet like my buddy, who's now literally horrified at what he did. But instead, you show your valid approved voter ID, which is a driver's license, one that would be granted to you by the voting authorities for free, or it could come through the election process on a verified person, not just because they have a driver's license, but they're verified as U.S. citizens, so we can stop the illegals from voting because they just walk in and do motor voter, which is the whole model of undermining our country and undermining our democracy. If we can do these things and follow the Carter-Baker Commission's model to the T, and whether you're a Democrat like Carter or a Republican like Baker, they understood that that was the precious franchise that every American has. So it's important that we do this, and we do it so that America can have, we the people, one person, one vote, who's eligible to vote, who's registered to vote, who's interested in voting. Let them vote. Let them vote in one day, not over a stretched out period, so that in turn they have the opportunity to know that their vote isn't diluted by a fake vote or a vote that's from a person who's an illegal alien, and they are illegal aliens. And then what we can do is we can bring America back. We can all realize that we as the American people have selected our town commissioner, our county commissioners, our county executives, our state representatives at the House and Senate levels as delegates and senators, our lieutenant governors, our attorney generals, the people that are our secretaries of state, the people that are our comptrollers of the Treasury, who are elected because they're duly elected to serve, and they swear an oath to the Constitution of the United States to preserve and protect our Constitution and follow the rules upon which they've been given their job. And we can't have in Congress people who say their allegiance is to Somalia and that they want to see a war, as you mentioned earlier about war before we went on air, where they want to have a war where Somalia takes over all their neighbors as the greater Somalia homeland. And I'm speaking specifically of Ilhan Omar. And then when we have a vote to say we do not want Hamas ever again to do what they did on that horrific day where under a satanic evil method they butchered so many people in Israel. And then we have a vote that says we do not want any person from Gaza to have an ability to come into the United States who had participated in any way in that. And you have Cori Bush and Rashida Tlaib go and vote against that. Every Democrat, every Republican voted for it but them in the House. We have to throw them out. We have to throw them out. They can no longer reside in Congress because they are not following the oath they've sworn to uphold as congresswomen from their districts, whether it's Dearborn, Michigan, or St. Paul, Minnesota. And why is it that we have someone like Ilhan Omar, who her district abuts St. Paul? What are the elite trying to do to America? Are they trying to create an America where people become so offended by Constantinople that they have to change the name to Istanbul? Are they so upset eventually? Are they going to be so upset eventually in St. Paul, where that's so offensive, we're going to have to change the name in Minnesota of the Twin Cities from Minneapolis, St. Paul, the element that reflects our American value system so perfectly. The greatest writer, Corinthians, Romans, and the various other books and authored stories that he wrote to speak to the people all throughout the God-given lands where Jesus walked and beyond. Are we going to have to change that name to Istanbul, to St. Paul, to Istanbul? I don't think so. We got to shut down the resettlement. We got to stop it cold. And when I talk to my friends overseas, and this is just an example of my love of my fellow human being, when I speak to my Kurdish friends, my Arab friends, whether it's Egypt, whether it's in Iraq, whether it's in the Kurdistan region of Iraq, or the United Arab Emirates, you know what the one thing they tell me? They say, Dave, you're taking people who have been displaced. They've just seen their children die. They've just seen their mothers die. They're being taken out of an area where they're familiar, where they know the culture, they know the community, they know the language, they have businesses here. And then all of a sudden they're resettled to a place, a land, where it's unfamiliar. Their culture is completely foreign to them.
Borders, language, culture.
Borders, language, culture.
Yeah.
Well, no, my son talks about it because my son is a devotee to all of these issues.
What's your son's name?
Paul Wallace. I named him Paul because of St. Paul. I also named him Paul because I have a tradition of our faith in our family, and I named him after my uncle as well. But when I think about St. Paul, the apostle, that embodies who I try to reflect. And further, until we can perfect our bodies and perfect our souls, we know we have to act and think about how Jesus acted. So we've got to love our neighbors. We even have to love our enemies. But that doesn't mean we have to allow our enemies to kill us. And we have to stop these kinds of things, because the first duty of government is to protect its people. And you can't put people in who have just seen the most horrific murders of their families into a foreign culture and expect them to be able to heal from their wounds. And this is what's being told to me by the Kurds and the Arabs, who take their own monies out of their pockets to get these people back on their feet. I've walked through the refugee camps. I've walked through the indigenous peoples, non-indigenous peoples camps, where they've been brought in And we gotta have a situation where these people know that in the future they can return back to their homes, return back to their schools, return back to their homes and businesses and the rest of their families that are still surviving. And we can't just spread them out where they have no community. And then when they do find community, there are those terrorists who want to control them, manipulate them, so they become part of sleeper cells who want to kill us.
So what do you think there? Because I know where you've been on that. What do you think of the United States in the UN? What are your thoughts on the UN, Dave?
You're gonna love this.
Now what are you doing? Hitting the train home or what?
I love it. The UN is a socialist organization. It's trying to undermine all of our American values. And worse than that, they're trying to destroy our friends and make them enemies, our allies into enemies. So what we have to do is ask our friends in Cyprus, as an example, where Turkey trying to rebuild their Ottoman Empire under Erdogan, and not all Turks feel this way, but the leadership, again, the elite, always try to do this to the rank and file who are Turkish Cypriots and Greek Cypriots that have grown up in the same schools together, and yet they're trying to divide them. And they've divided Cyprus in 1974 and split it apart. So I say, what has the UN done for you? What have they done to allow you to reunify your country and stop the criminal cartels from coming down into the other areas of Cyprus that are still part of the original Cyprus to protect you? And then you're a member of the EU. What is the EU doing to help you regain sovereignty over your entire island country of Cyprus, where there's beautiful people. And I've met the Turkish Cypriots, I've met the Greek Cypriots. They haven't done a damn thing. I say, start a statehood party. Start a party that's going to imbue the values of America. We don't need a UN. We already have the United States of America. Let us fulfill our dreams by extending out our reach and giving everybody that hope and dreams and those opportunities, and see America as that shining city on the hill, the beacon of freedom, the beacon of hope, the beacon of liberty, the beacon that's going to give everybody prosperity, that's going to elevate human dignity. That's what America's about. And when we are proud of who we are, when we believe in America, then people around the world, they won't have to come here. They can live their lives right where they are, based on the same value systems of America, where they have constitutions of government, where they have a Bill of Rights that protects their people as we do. People around the world don't have free speech. They don't have freedom of religion to practice their religion. They don't have freedom of the Second Amendment to protect themselves. Just think of what happened in Israel. I asked my friend, why weren't these people able to protect themselves? Even an ally like Israel's disarming their people and seeing them slaughtered. In Afghanistan, imagine a mother hovering over her children. If she had a Second Amendment right, and some Taliban guy comes up with a knife and wants to slit her throat, slit her children's throat, all because they assisted when people were in such poverty and the United States was there to help them. And instead, she only could cower because she didn't have a gun to protect her children. And I know her mother might go down fighting, but I know the first thing she'd do, she would take them out with her, and they wouldn't be able to take out herself and her children. When you look all around the world, the first thing governments do is disarm. The Nazis did it, the Venezuelans did it. All of these people, when they want to take charge, when they want to put full control of government over you, put the boot of government on your throat and suffocate you and destroy you as a person, as a human being, they disarm you. The Chinese did it, the Russians have done it. And then we also have a right in one component of the Second Amendment to have militias.
Correct.
And in Virginia, they've actually been able to create well organized, as it's stated in the Constitution, militias, and these people are able to help sheriffs when sheriffs need them to call.
Okay. On that note, Dave, there is an organization called Restore Liberty. If you ever watch Newsmax, you'll see two of their founders frequently comment on foreign affairs. Darren Gobb and Blaine Holt.
Right.
Restore
I love
Liberty.
Blaine Holt.
You know of the name.
Go ahead.
You know the name. These are veterans that are organizing state to state to communicate with it. Is he an acting?
No. He's he had been a general. Go ahead. So go
retired,
ahead.
Right.
Yeah,
Brigadier General.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right.
There's a piece of information that was conveyed to me about 3.5 weeks ago by a man down in Panama. His name is Michael Yon, Y-O-N. And it blew my mind when he said it, because what we see on the southern border is Joe Biden and Pelosi saying, it's a free-for-all. We're so wealthy here, yet we have a $34 trillion debt. But we're so wealthy and prosperous here, come on in. That's how I interpret it, Dave. Come on in. The door's open.
Right, that's what
Don't
they're
come
doing.
to my own home, but hey, you can come into my neighbor's home.
Yeah, don't come into my neighborhood. Go into my neighbor's neighborhood, my other fellow Americans' neighborhood, where they're average middle class, and instead, but you stay out of my rich, palatial neighborhood because we're above you. Again, the elite don't see the problem because they're insulated from the problem.
So this is what caught my mind. In 1979, Carter made an agreement, a treaty, and a pact with Omar Torrijos. And I believe Torrijos' plane blew up. I don't know if that's right or not. I think it was Torrijos. Mm-hmm. But he made a pact with Torrijos and said that the Panama Canal at the end of the century would go back to the Panama government, or would go back to that land, that canal.
And we would give up the Panama Canal Treaty Zone, and they would then take full control of it. Exactly.
And a few years later, after that, the former U.S. Army fort, which became former U.S. Army Fort Clayton, was converted into something called the City of Knowledge, the Ciudad de Saber. And that is where the UN operates various agencies and NGOs. And one of those agencies, known as the International Organization for Migration, according to Jan, is orchestrating this illegal invasion. Well, any invasion is illegal, right? But is orchestrating this invasion into our country. So therefore, that means
across the river
Nations,
and the narrow isthmus.
Yeah, well, they're
coordinating this. They're coordinating this. Is what
the
you're
UN
saying.
is coordinating this invasion into our country, across our southern border. The UN is behind that, according to Jan. And that agency is the International Organization for Migration. So I wrote an article called "The UN is a Trojan Horse." More importantly, No More Deaths Camp, which James O'Keefe just went into about a week ago, saying that I called No More Deaths Camp a Trojan Horse, because what they're doing is they're using organizations such as the Red Cross and Catholic Charities and other religious-based
and
organizations.
they're paying them.
Right, to be a refugee service, to give them water, to give food. But yet they're running these drugs.
They're the
and these
Greyhound
weapons.
service, the freight services.
It's deception.
Yeah, absolutely.
Art of war. Sun Tzu, the art of war is deception.
By the way, the best way to win a war is by not having to fire a shot. And invasion is the greatest method to do that. And when you change a culture, you never have to fight again against that enemy, because that enemy has now lost their culture. And that moment they've lost their culture, there is no country to defend. There is no country to have a secure, prosperous people, because the people are a part of the problem that they were trying to leave behind. You've then, through the UN, created the problem right where there was the only solution. That's why we can't bring in. We have to extend out. We have to extend our value system, not through armies, not through coercion, but through the absolute values, not imperialism. The one thing that allows America to be the place everybody would love to come, and that is our value system, our Bill of Rights, our Constitution, and our framework of government under the Declaration of Independence, which is a philosophy of Judeo-Christian values. Because although we have that philosophy, that is the only reason why we can have a secular government of, by, and for the people, of we the people. And that's why we the people are the first statements in our founding documents. We the people. And yet overseas, it's government to overlord us and to coerce us. And John Adams said you would never have a government that does not provide happiness, unless it's a government of coercion. And the first thing to do is take our money away. But I want to go back to Panama. And then, at the turn of the century, we turned the Panama Canal over to the Panamanians. But then, through the coercion of China, they have now taken over the port of Colón in the Caribbean Sea side, and then the Panama City side on the Pacific side. And that is through money, corruption, filthy, dirty corruption that the Chinese have lined the pockets of these vulnerable leaders. The Panamanians believe it's the single greatest threat to them as well as the United States, because now they have given open carte blanche to any, not just freighters, not just tankers, but frigates, naval vessels, of flagged vessels that equate to Iran and our enemies, but especially Iranian destroyers. And we have just recently seen 2 destroyers, possibly a third that was expected to arrive as well, travel through the Panama Canal. They are now poaching inside of our Gulf of Mexico. They are poaching in an area where we see the Chinese have the port of Colón. They're also building a port in Nicaragua. They're also building a port in Brazil. They were building a port in Argentina, but because they have a conservative there, we hope that that's going to stop. They have a port in Cuba. Those ports are able to maintain those Iranian frigates. And if we are to attack because of attacks against the United States by Iran, and we attack Iran, those destroyers could easily have the kinds of mid-range, medium-range missiles that could harm Americans. And we know they have nuclear vessels, or they have nuclear missiles, nuclear missiles. And those nuclear missiles could be the same ones that hit America. And we are at risk right now of the greatest security threat to mankind that America's ever seen. And those kinds of threats are the kind that would make 9/11 look like a firecracker going off.
So, Dave Wallace, it's 12:35. The President speaks in about 25 minutes. Art Harmon, would you like to say, because I know the two of you know each other, would you like to say a few words? Just introduce yourself.
I just want to mention, if people want to know about my campaign, if they want to support my campaign, it's Dave Wallace, DaveWallace.US. Only Americans can get .us.
It only come up in America.
Only for American citizens.
Only American citizens.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Ian.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And stick around, because you may want to chime in here. Art, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. Art Harmon. I'm with the Conservative Caucus, found 1974. What we are is a grassroots action organization, and this year our big push is to register voters, get them to vote early, get their friends to do the same, use all their social media contacts. We're building networks of people around the country. And if you go to theconservativecaucus.org, people can sign. There's a little volunteer button. You click that, fill out your name and contact info, and then we can help train you on what you should do to bring in more votes. Because this is what's going to matter this year. It's there was the George Santos race in New York. We lost that. Why? Well, the Democrats banked their votes early. We didn't as much. It snowed on Election Day, and so on Election Day, that
8 inches.
Snow just totally kills participation.
Voter turnout.
So I urge everybody to go to theconservativecaucus.org,
Cloud seeding.
sign up, and we that's how we can win. It's the only way we can win is just get our people out, your friends, your church friends, your co-workers, folks down the street. And you can go to places like gun shows to register people. It's surprising how many people, even at a gun show where you'd think First and Second Amendment rights, they'd be really, really active, but they're not all. So go there, you just have a clipboard, you can get, and register people if the state has a form, or just get their contact info, or sign them up on the website right there on your phone. This is the kind of thing that people can do, makes a big difference. Now, we also do a lot of lobbying on issues, legislative things, vote for this, vote against that. And so when you sign up as a volunteer, there's a little volunteer button, then you'll see, you'll be able to get our alerts to not only do things like register folks and get them out to vote, but to, take action. We're building a statewide, state-by-state network also, where then you'll get alerts from the state and even district levels. Like there's going to be a school board meeting in your town on next Tuesday. Go there. Or everybody to the state capitol on Saturday. We're going to have signs and we're going to say, down with this tax increase. That's the kind of thing, just getting more and more people out. The left invented a lot of these things. We got to beat them. But we actually can. And if we do, we'll win in November.
How do the two of you gentlemen know each other?
Well, for politics, and I helped on Dave's 2016 campaign for Senate. So it's a great pleasure to work with him. And
we've also had a much closer relationship than that, because on many of the issues, he and I discussed these issues, and we formulated models on how to beat them back. We also see Taiwan as a particular country that if they were able to have sufficient arms of their own and not play into the Chinese hands, they can then defend themselves and become that fortress that they need to be to fend off the Russian, the Chinese landing craft, as well as the fighter jets.
In August, I was in Taiwan, and I met with the
submarines and so forth.
I met with the head of the All-Out Defense Committee in their legislature. I met with their defense think tank, Foreign Ministry of Foreign Affairs personnel, with some asymmetric deterrence issues on a paper that I'd written, and that got good reception there. And but I was also driving all around the island. Even went to one of the Matsu Islands. Now, just in recent days, China's been terrorizing the island of Kinmen. These are little islands about 10 miles off the coast of China. So I was literally, on the island I was on, Daegu, able to look straight across and see the shoreline of communist China. Now, those will be the first stepping stones, and by circling those islands with Chinese military vessels, and they even boarded a Taiwan ship, and were hassling people for about half an hour. But they're on the front lines, and I have great concern for their safety and livelihood. And so when I was on Daegu Island, I was talking to people and, saying, you guys are going to be the number one. The first bootsteps are going to be on your island, the island of Kinmen and others.
Okay.
So But I hoped I gave the folks in the Defense Ministry some good ideas, and of course we're hoping and praying for holding off until when Trump wins. I think we're safe for a while.
Sure. Yeah. Get that.
And see trade lanes. If there's an infraction right now, see trade lanes. We have to bring back industrialization to America. So if those sea trade lanes are cut off by the Chinese, who have the kind of blue sea navy that's able to fight and block our trade vessels,
this is actually something that I was talking to them about.
Reindustrialize.
Yeah, because a blockade is the most likely first action in a war. You blockade it, and you dare any ship that brings petroleum and other supplies in, and the island's dark within 45 days. And so I was giving them various ideas I won't talk about on the radio, but how they can help deter a blockade from succeeding. And part of that is buying time. Because remember the first days of the Ukraine war, it was like, Zelensky, whatever side you're on now, go back to the beginning of the war. Putin goes in, he's got this 100-mile-long convoy, and everyone says, it's all over. And in fact, Zelensky in those first days went to the EU Council and he says, please help me. And they were all, this is before they did start, but what he said was, what they said to him was basically, why aren't you dead? You're supposed to be dead. We gave up on you guys. But it was because of Putin did not do a shock and awe like we did in, say, Iraq, and it was this slow thing, and then that gave people the time to say, oh, we can fight back. And I can make a Molotov cocktail, and I can throw it at a tank, and I can kill a tank. And that's the kind of thing that we want to see more of in Taiwan. I want to see, I met with a group called Kuma Academy, and they're training Taiwanese on civil defense and so forth. And so I was pushing them a little bit. I was saying, well, you know what you got to do is you got to get 1 million guns in the arms of Taiwan citizens. Make them honorary whatevers. And so that then, if you're a Chinese soldier and you're walking up that beach and you see those windows of houses and apartments, and you just imagine each one of those has got a gun, and the same done me. That's going to demoralize him. It's going to demoralize Xi Jinping, and say maybe just knowing that those people would be there, they may say it ain't worth it. It ain't worth it. We're going to lose 10 million troops, and it's going to be a bloodbath. So. Anyway, everyone out there, you can go to theconservativecaucus.org. There's a volunteer button. You can sign up as a volunteer, and we'll tell you all about grassroots politics, how you can go out, register voters in your neighborhood, go to those gun shows, wherever people congregate, and then get your neighbors to turn out and vote early so that if it snows or rains or whatever, your vote's in there. It's going to be counted.
And Art, who's the founder of your organization again?
That was Howard Phillips. Howard Phillips was one of the great men in the 1970s who, along with people like Morton Blackwell and others, helped founded what we call sort of the modern conservative movement. And so he devoted his life to this cause, restoring America. And we're continuing work in his giant footsteps to help restore America, make America great again. And we're actually working to help some Senate candidates and even the race for the White House. So again, theconservativecaucus.org. Sign up. Delighted to have to be in touch with you all.
Sounds excellent. Some final thoughts in regards to.
You got a star here.
Is a star? He's impressed me so far. Some final thoughts, Art, in regards to the current state of your country. Just I know it's a complex, probably a complex answer, but just some final thoughts.
Well, one thing is people have to seek out alternative media because and keep your kids out of public school. even if you are talking to your kids at home every day in the evening for dinner, those communist teachers have more influence over them because they got more time. They got 6, 7, 8 hours a day with your kids, and they're trying to turn your kids against you.
But Art, I don't live in a socialist communist society. I live in a democracy. What do you say to that?
Go to school board meetings, protest, elect better school board meetings where you have that opportunity. It's all grassroots. Get your friends to vote for good school board members. And if nobody else is good on the ballot, what the hell? Run for office yourself. Whether it's school board, whether it's some little county commission. Sometimes those lower races actually don't get a whole lot of attention. And so an angry mom or an angry pop can go in there and, raise money through the churches and gun clubs and folks that are on our side, and then get out there and knock on those doors and say, I'm running for school board. I want to protect your kids so they're not exposed to terrible stuff. We just want to teach them reading, writing, arithmetic, and how to think. Not what to think, how to think. And if all else fails, spend so much time with your kids undoing the lies they've been fed so that they believe, in America's great, that anybody, regardless of their class, background, color, sex, is equal and no different, and there's no reason to think that somebody has more or less privileges because of how they were born or where they were born or whatever. Martin Luther King, character, not color. And so spend more time with your kids knowing that they're being fed the worst propaganda. And then they're actually they'll actually say, don't tell your parents, and we won't tell your parents. Now you can make up your own pronouns. Wouldn't you like to be a she? Wouldn't you like to be whatever gobbledygook? And they will work at them. You just got to work harder and tell them that you love them.
Oh, that's the most important. Conservative Caucus, and you are Art Harmon.
Art Harmon, theconservativecaucus.org. You just go there. Remember, volunteer button, sign up. We'll send you stuff.
Excellent.
No money needed. You can donate if you like, but no money needed. We just want to help you, help us, and restore America.
Art, thanks for joining the discussion of truth. And
Amen. Thanks
Dave
so
broke
much.
away earlier.
Indeed.